Lincoln Thompson, a dedicated military officer, and Claire Bennett had always been the epitome of a strong, loving couple. They met in their early 20s, and despite the 6-year age gap, their connection was undeniable. Lincoln's disciplined nature complemented Claire's nurturing personality, and their love only grew stronger over the years. After 5 years of marriage, they bought a spacious home in the suburbs, a place where they envisioned building their family. Soon after, they welcomed their daughter, Lane, a bright and curious child who became the center of their world. Life was perfect. Lincoln's career was thriving. Claire enjoyed being a stay-at-home mom, and Lane brought endless joy to their lives. However, balancing military life with family was no easy feat. Lincoln's deployments were frequent, but Claire always managed to hold down the fort. She took pride in creating a warm, loving environment for Lane, even when Lincoln was away. Their marriage was built on trust, communication, and mutual respect, and for years, it seemed unshakable. Lane, now 8 years old, was growing into a sharp and observant girl, often surprising her parents with her maturity. The Thompsons were a picture-perfect family. But beneath the surface, the strain of Lincoln's demanding career was beginning to show. Claire never complained about the sacrifices she made for Lincoln's career. She understood the importance of his work and admired his dedication. But as Lane grew older, Claire began to feel the weight of her solitude. The large house that once felt like a dream now echoed with loneliness whenever Lincoln was away. She missed the companionship of her husband, the late-night conversations, and the shared laughter that had defined their early years. Still, she remained committed to their life, finding solace in her role as a mother and homemaker. Lane, however, noticed the subtle changes in her mother. She saw the way Claire's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when Lincoln was gone for weeks at a time. The little girl, wise beyond her years, tried to fill the void by spending more time with her mother, but even she couldn't replace the connection Claire longed for. The foundation of their family was strong, but the cracks were beginning to form, and no one could predict how deep they would go. As Lane grew older, Lincoln's responsibilities in the military increased. Promotions came with more frequent and longer deployments, leaving Claire to manage the household alone for extended periods. The once strong bond between the couple began to fray under the weight of distance and time. Claire tried to stay positive, throwing herself into motherhood and home projects, but the loneliness was becoming unbearable. She missed the intimacy and partnership that had defined their marriage, and the occasional phone calls and video chats with Lincoln were no longer enough to fill the void. Lane, ever perceptive, sensed her mother's growing sadness. She tried to cheer Claire up with her witty remarks and imaginative games, but even her efforts couldn't fully lift her mother's spirits. The little girl began to resent her father's absence, though she never voiced her feelings. She loved Lincoln deeply, but couldn't understand why he had to be away so often. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt empty and cold, a stark contrast to the vibrant family life they had once enjoyed. Claire tried to distract herself by taking up new hobbies. She started gardening, redecorated the house, and even joined a book club, but nothing seemed to ease the ache in her heart. She longed for the days when Lincoln was home, when they could share quiet moments together and watch Lane grow as a family. But as the months passed, those moments became fewer and farther between, and Claire began to wonder if their marriage could survive the strain. Lincoln, too, felt the distance growing between them. He hated being away from his family, but his sense of duty kept him committed to his work. He tried to make up for his absence by sending gifts and letters, but he knew it wasn't the same as being there. The guilt weighed heavily on him, and he often found himself questioning whether he was doing enough to support Claire and Lane. Despite his best efforts, the cracks in their marriage continued to widen, and neither of them knew how to fix it. The turning point came when Lincoln was deployed for 6 weeks, the longest stretch he had ever been away. Claire tried to stay strong, but the loneliness was overwhelming. She found herself counting down the days until his return, clinging to the hope that things would go back to normal once he was home. But when Lincoln finally returned, the distance between them was palpable. The easy intimacy they had once shared was gone, replaced by awkward silences and forced conversations. Claire tried to reconnect with Lincoln, but the emotional toll of his absence had left her feeling disconnected and resentful. She longed for the passion and closeness they had once shared, but it seemed like a distant memory. Lincoln, too, felt the strain, but he didn't know how to bridge the gap. He tried to be more present, but his work continued to pull him away, leaving little time for them to rebuild their relationship. It was during this time that Claire decided to take cooking classes at home. She thought it would be a fun way to pass the time and maybe even reignite her passion for something she had once loved. Lane joined her for some of the classes, and the two of them bonded over their shared love of food. But it was the instructor, Fred Collins, who would change everything. Fred was charming, attractive, and incredibly kind, and Claire found herself looking forward to their weekly sessions more than she cared to admit. Lincoln, unaware of the growing connection between Claire and Fred, was relieved to see his wife happy again. He even met Fred during one of the classes and thought he was a great guy. Little did he know, the seeds of betrayal had already been planted, and their lives were about to change forever. Fred's presence in Claire's life became a source of comfort and excitement. His easygoing nature and genuine interest in her well-being made her feel seen and appreciated in a way she hadn't in years. The cooking classes became a highlight of her week, and she found herself opening up to Fred in ways she hadn't expected. Lane, too, enjoyed the classes, but even she noticed the way her mother's eyes lingered on Fred a little too long. One evening, after a particularly intense class, Claire and Fred shared a bottle of wine. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and before they knew it, the line between friendship and something more had been crossed. In a moment of weakness, Claire kissed Fred, and one thing led to another. Lane, who had been playing in her room, accidentally walked in on them and saw everything. The image of her mother and Fred together was burned into her mind, but she was too shocked and confused to say anything. Claire was consumed with guilt, but the thrill of the affair was too intoxicating to resist. She and Fred began meeting in secret, careful to keep their relationship hidden from Lincoln and Lane. But the weight of her betrayal weighed heavily on her, and she knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Lane, meanwhile, was struggling to process what she had seen. She loved her mother deeply, but couldn't understand why she would betray her father. The little girl felt torn between her loyalty to her parents and her desire to protect her family. She knew she had to do something, but she wasn't sure what. The once happy home was now filled with tension and secrets, and Lane was caught in the middle of it all. Lincoln began to notice subtle changes in Claire's behavior. She seemed distant and preoccupied, and her intimate moments felt forced and hollow. He tried to brush it off as stress or fatigue, but deep down, he knew something was wrong. His suspicions grew when he found a text message on Claire's phone from Fred, filled with heart emojis and cryptic messages. Confronting her about it, Claire dismissed it as harmless flirting, but Lincoln wasn't convinced. The tension between them reached a boiling point when Lane, unable to keep the secret any longer, blurted out the truth during a heated argument. The revelation shattered Lincoln, and the once strong foundation of their marriage crumbled. Claire was devastated, not only by the pain she had caused, but also by the realization that she had lost the trust of her daughter. The fallout was swift and brutal. Lincoln filed for divorce, determined to protect Lane from the chaos. The custody battle was bitter and emotionally draining, with both parents fighting for their daughter's love and loyalty. Lane, caught in the crossfire, struggled to make sense of the broken pieces of her family. In the end, the Thompson story was a tragic reminder of the fragility of love and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Lincoln and Claire's once perfect marriage was reduced to ashes, and Lane was left to pick up the pieces. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love now stood as a silent witness to the pain and heartbreak that had torn them apart. Lincoln's suspicions about Claire's behavior grew stronger with each passing day. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, especially after finding the text messages from Fred. The once trusting husband began to question everything. Claire's late-night errands, her sudden interest in cooking, and the way she seemed to light up whenever Fred's name was mentioned. He tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on his work and his daughter, but the nagging doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Claire, on the other hand, was drowning in guilt. She knew her affair with Fred was wrong, but the emotional connection she had with him was something she hadn't felt in years. She tried to convince herself that it was just a fleeting mistake, but the more time she spent with Fred, the harder it became to let go. She found herself torn between her loyalty to Lincoln and her growing feelings for Fred, a conflict that left her emotionally exhausted. Lane, meanwhile, was struggling to process what she had seen. The image of her mother and Fred together haunted her, and she couldn't understand why Claire would betray Lincoln, who worked so hard to provide for their family. The little girl felt a deep sense of betrayal, not just for her father, but for herself as well. She wanted to confront Claire, to demand answers, but she was afraid of what it might do to their already fragile relationship. The tension in the Thompson household was palpable. Lincoln's growing suspicion, Claire's guilt, and Lane's inner turmoil created a toxic environment that no one knew how to escape. The once happy family was now a powder keg waiting to explode. It was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. One evening, after a particularly long and stressful day, Lincoln decided to confront Claire about his suspicions. He had spent weeks gathering evidence, text messages, receipts, and even a few photos, and he was determined to get the truth. The conversation started calmly, but it quickly escalated into a heated argument. Claire tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the midst of their shouting, Lane burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't keep the secret any longer. "I saw you, Mom," she screamed, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "I saw you with Fred that night in the kitchen. How could you do that to Dad? How could you do that to us?" The room fell silent as Claire and Lincoln stared at their daughter, stunned by her outburst. Claire's heart broke as she realized the extent of the damage she had caused. She tried to explain, to apologize, but the words fell hollow. Lincoln, devastated and furious, demanded that Claire leave the house. The once loving couple was now at war, and Lane was caught in the middle, her innocence shattered by the betrayal she had witnessed. The days that followed were a blur of anger, tears, and painful conversations. Lincoln moved into the guest room, refusing to share a bed with Claire, while Lane retreated into herself, struggling to process the chaos around her. The Thompson family, once a symbol of love and stability, was now a broken shell of its former self. The revelation of Claire's affair sent shockwaves through the Thompson household. Lincoln, devastated and betrayed, made the difficult decision to file for divorce. He couldn't forgive Claire for what she had done, and he was determined to protect Lane from the fallout. The custody battle that followed was bitter and emotionally draining, with both parents fighting for their daughter's love and loyalty. Claire, desperate to salvage what was left of her relationship with Lane, tried to explain her actions. She apologized repeatedly, begging for forgiveness, but the damage was done. Lane, wise beyond her years, struggled to reconcile the mother she loved with the woman who had betrayed her father. She felt torn between her parents, unsure of where her loyalty should lie. Fred, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to distance himself from Claire. He hadn't intended to cause so much pain, but the damage was irreversible. Claire, now alone and facing the consequences of her actions, was forced to confront the reality of what she had lost. The once happy family was now fractured beyond repair, and the road to healing seemed impossibly long. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, Lane became the silent casualty of her parents' war. She withdrew from both of them, seeking solace in her books and her cat, the only constants in her life. The little girl who had once been so full of life and curiosity was now a shadow of her former self, her innocence lost to the chaos of her parents' broken marriage. The final confrontation between Lincoln and Claire took place in their lawyer's office, where they were finalizing the terms of their divorce. The tension between them was palpable, and the air was thick with unspoken anger and regret. Lincoln, determined to protect Lane, fought for full custody, while Claire argued that she deserved a second chance. The argument escalated, with both parents accusing the other of failing their family. Lincoln blamed Claire for destroying their marriage, while Claire accused Lincoln of neglecting her and Lane for his career. The lawyers tried to mediate, but the bitterness between the couple was too deep to overcome. In the end, the judge ruled in favor of joint custody, but the damage had already been done. Lane, now forced to split her time between two homes, felt like a pawn in her parents' war. She loved both of them, but the constant tension and fighting took a toll on her emotional well-being. The little girl who had once been so full of life was now a quiet, withdrawn shadow of her former self. As Lincoln and Claire signed the divorce papers, they both realized the enormity of what they had lost. The love and trust that had once defined their relationship were gone, replaced by anger and regret. The once happy family was now a distant memory, and the road to healing seemed impossibly long. The aftermath of the divorce was a painful and lonely time for everyone involved. Lincoln threw himself into his work, using it as a distraction from the pain of his failed marriage. He tried to be the best father he could be to Lane, but the emotional distance between them was hard to bridge. Claire, now living in a small apartment, struggled to rebuild her life. She tried to reconnect with Lane, but the little girl's trust in her had been shattered. Fred, realizing the damage he had caused, cut ties with Claire, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. Lane, caught in the middle of her parents' war, struggled to find her place in the world. She loved both of them, but the constant tension and fighting took a toll on her emotional well-being. She found solace in her books and her cat, but the pain of her parents' broken marriage was always there, a constant reminder of the family she had lost. In the end, the Thompson story was a tragic reminder of the fragility of love and the devastating consequences of betrayal. The once happy family was now a distant memory, and the road to healing seemed impossibly long. But amidst the pain and heartbreak, there was a glimmer of hope, a hope that one day they would find a way to move forward and rebuild their lives, even if it meant doing so apart.